This is the Armchair Science Podcast with El Takumi and Zokya Media. Welcome, everyone, to the Armchair Science Podcast. I'm El Takumi.
And I'm Zokya Media.
And we're recording live on Twitch on this fine Sunday, like we do on all Sundays from now on here on out. And this week, we have a special guest. We've got Jack, an evolutionary biologist and science creator here on Twitch. And I could sit here and talk more, but we're going to let Jack talk, themselves. So, Jack, who are you? What do you do?
So, yes, I usually tell people initially that I'm an evolutionary biologist, but the technical name is an evolutionary anthropologist, which is someone who studies human evolution through the lens of, evolution. And that makes sense. But anyway, so basically what I do is that we study like animal behavior. We also study fossils. And we try to understand how humans became the way we are today by looking at parallels in, like I said, in animal behavior and in the fossil record. And so, but my specialty is in animal behavior. I didn't go the paleo route, and I'm still a student. But I am getting a second master's in statistics because I have a master's in evolutionary anthropology, but I wanted to get another one in statistics to really combine the two so I could go into a lab and help consult with their statistics and really help them develop better data analysis and papers and such.
Okay, that's a lot. Very cool. My question then is, so what when we're talking about like evolutionary biology and evolutionary biologists, or even evolutionary anthropology, what makes that different from other types of biologists or anthropologists?
So I think that's a good question. I think it's a lot about specialty. Because like even when you talk to a biologist, most of them are like ecologists, or they study like entomology or something like that. It's all about it's all about what we specialize in. And I think most other biologists and stuff don't really study behavior. They study kind of dynamics of an ecosystem or of a population. Or if they're not studying ecological dynamics, they're studying how a cell, like what works in a cell, the genetics, or something like that. And so we're in kind of the in-between space between kind of physiology and ecology, where it's kind of, you combine the two to understand how an animal interacts with both the environment and also the with each other socially. And for me, the social aspect is usually the most fascinating thing to me.
That is it's a lot, man. And honestly, whenever I think of anthropology, and I know this is
Right.
is going to be this is probably a jerk question you get quite a bit, or I always think of like the forensic anthropology, like Bones, that show
Right.
from, and I don't know, that's just a me thing.
It's not a jerk question.
So like if you then were to, so largely then speaking, like of a person in your type of field, are you limited largely to like academia, or are there other avenues of research that have space for that type of thing?
So I think part of it is that evolution anthropology is still in a phase where it's not really been thought about in most businesses. Currently, I think most of it is in academia. But I think as businesses grow and they want to kind of get more, like they want to understand more like human behavior and stuff, it gives us an avenue or to spread out beyond that area. Um, but for the most part, it is very academia heavy. But I think it does help with it touches a lot of different aspects of human life, like especially like medically, like how we understand our evolution has a huge impact of how you can treat someone medically. um and I could go on for a while about that because of the classes and stuff, like aspects of human health through an evolutionary lens is a growing field of medicine, because it's such a huge gap in our understanding, because people often we know how to treat a disease, but we don't really understand how the disease arises. And if it's often not a non-infectious chronic disease, it's often happening because of an evolutionary mismatch of what's going on now versus what we evolved before.
Wow.
So Jack, can you tell us a little bit about your education?
Yes. So for my undergrad, I went to Duke University, and there they have a um you can major in evolutionary anthropology. I majored in both evolutionary anthropology and biology, and chose that um I chose that, well, both, because there was so much overlap. It was really easy to get both. You almost automatically get a biology minor by being an evolutionary anthropology major. But also, the reason why I chose the university is because they have an incredibly strong evolutionary anthropology department. I actually didn't realize just how incredible the department was before until I went to grad school and then came back and visited. And I had read so many more papers that I've been like, oh, that's that author. Oh, that. And I'd be walking down the halls. I'm like, oh wait, he writes all these papers. Like, it's like I didn't realize just how like big the people were there. Like they're really like at the pinnacle. A lot of them are at the pinnacle of their studies. And Duke also has the Duke Lemur Center. Um and the Duke Lemur Center has the highest number of lemurs species outside of Madagascar in the world.
That's awesome.
And it's
Well,
not
are there
any
lemurs
kind of
outside of Madagascar? Beside, like, not naturally, right? They're just in
right.
Madagascar.
Lemurs are only
Yeah.
found in Madagascar now. They were everywhere, but
Oh, I didn't realize that.
as more modern monkeys evolved, they pushed out the lemurs, and the only ones left were the lemurs that lived on Madagascar because it's so far away from the mainland.
That is, I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
Like,
So, like, the Duke Lemur Center doesn't do any kind of like drug testing or anything like that. It is a purely behavioral site um, where they study lemur behavior. And I've been on several projects that studied different aspects of lemur behavior, and even got to do a couple little projects with that. But it was just overall, that's Duke really gave me a really in-depth background and knowledge of animal behavior. And even outside of animal behavior, I even got into like kind of a little bit of archaeology. My senior thesis was about arrowheads and like predicting how like when did we start actually making arrowheads, and how can you identify a lithic piece that actually could have been an effective projectile piece. Um, and that was I got to like 3D print arrowheads and like shoot them into ballistics gel and
nice.
Cool.
that sort of thing. And it was such if I felt like a Mythbusters. It was incredible.
Say the
That's
maker
one
in
of the
me
Um,
things we
loves
talk
that.
about. This is the thing we talk about a lot here, is that when you talk to scientists about any particular thing, it always ends up touching other fields of study. And this is why it's very
always,
important. Like when,
always.
people are like, oh, well, why do we have a use for, like, say, and I don't mean to pick on Belimp, but an ant scientist, right? But then you find out that there's all sorts of things that tie in. The world is not simple, segmented, siloed things. It is all an interconnected part. So
I view our knowledge of science as like Swiss cheese. There's a lot of holes in it, but it's really well interconnected. And like your duty as a scientist is to fill up the holes and reinforce what we already know. And the reinforcement of what we already know, I feel, is always it's not nearly as looked down upon. It's looked down upon more than like discovering new things. But the thing is that often what's happening is that people will find some detail, and then other people try to branch off of it rather than going and like replicating the study and seeing if it still holds true or not. The replication crisis is freaking everywhere.
It's so you mentioned your educational experience, and I actually want to take it back.
Sorry. I get off track all the time.
No, it's fine.
So,
we love it.
yeah.
So I want to take it back even a little bit further, because the path from getting to, you know, young Jack to scientist is a you know, you don't just decide one day that, hey, by the way, I'm going to be a evolutionary biologist. There's a little bit of work that goes into it, so I'm told.
Right.
But if we're going to take it back like just a few more years, like how old were you when you determined that you wanted to pursue a career in science? And was there like a particular event or experience or person that pushed you in that direction?
So I grew up in a very like my dad has a degree in zoology, and both of my parents are doctors, and they really were all about like us learning and everything. So I grew up on like the National Geographic Kids TV shows. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of this, but like Amazing Planet or
Yep.
Geo. Wait, if any of you guys heard of Amazing Planet, then I'm gonna be stoked because that's one of my favorite old shows. But there's like Nat Geo Kids and Nat Geo Wild and stuff. But then I moved on to like the BBC. Like when I was about 10, I got Blue Planet, and that was I think it was from my uncle. And but I also was watching like Walking with Prehistoric Beasts. And I've always loved animals. Like I grew up in St. Louis, and the St. Louis Zoo is free. So like my family would
cool.
like if I was being too crazy, like my mom always would tell me she would take me to the primate house, and it had gibbons when they were there in the middle, and they would like circle around and stuff, and I would just chase them around until I like passed out. And so I've always been like really exposed to animals and science. Like I went on a safari when I went to the Galapagos when I was 9, and a safari when I was like 12, and stuff like that. And I mean, I was obsessed with Animal Planet. The most extreme, that was like my everything. And even younger with like Zaboomafoo, which
Oh my God, I remember that too.
takes place in the Duke Lemur Center.
I was going to mention Zamubafu because your Twitch icon makes me think of Zamubafu.
Right, and so and I actually got to work with some of Zaboomafoo's like children, because he was there just as a
Oh wow.
I could have met him, but he died when I was a sophomore there, and I wasted the chance of like meeting Zaboomafoo for real. So I always loved science, and then when I was little, I would watch all the shows, and like Steve Irwin was a huge hero of mine. Jeff Corn Experience, and like the most extreme were the three things I would watch religiously. And then Zaboomafoo. So the Duke Lemur Center is where Zaboomafoo was filmed, and I think his name was Julius. Was the lemur that was was the shafak that was Zaboomafoo. That's the species, a shafak lemur. SIFA. It's SIFAKA. It's like Shafaka, but it's actually pronounced Shafak. And so, but I got to work with some of his grandkids for some of the studies there. And so, which is always like super, super, super cool. Is that him singing over himself? Yeah, probably.
Yeah, that's 100% what it was. No, it's my fault because I have the it's set up as like a chat bot, like a chat command, and it definitely just started screaming, and like that was my fault. I should have checked that beforehand. That's because
it's totally fine.
So
So
speaking of some of your travels, you've recently been to Africa, right?
I've been to Africa for like science and stuff. I've been there 4 times.
Oh wow.
So that doesn't include that doesn't include the other time I went there for vacation. So I went there. So the first time I went there for science, and that was like um, a huge like impact on my decisions of where I was going to go, and my decision to go into animal behavior specifically was through a program called BEAM, Behavioral Ecology of African Mammals, and it's through Michigan State University. And they still have it. I don't know if they've been able to do it for because of COVID for the past couple of years, but um it's an incredible experience. So anyone can do this. Like so I didn't go to Michigan State. Like I said, I went to Duke, and I was looking up like programs that I could do over the summer, and I saw this program, and my advice and the professor for the lab I was working in, I was working in a baboon behavior lab, and she was like, oh my gosh, you have to do this. This is an incredible experience. Like, if you can afford it, you need to go. And I was like, I'm sold. I'm gonna go. And so I went, and it really was an incredible experience. For about 3.5 weeks, we went all over Kenya, and we learned and we learned how to collect behavior in the wild, how to collect different types of behavior, just animal behavior in general. And then we even did like a little project. Mine was hippo callbacks. So I had learned, and this is actually a project I would love to do for real. It'd be super interesting. So I learned that elephant seals roar at each other, and when they roar at each other, the bigger the male, the deeper the roar. And by this roar, males can determine how big the other male is. So if they hear a voice that's deeper than theirs, they're like, yeah, I'm not gonna, like, this guy's too big. And that's how they avoid a large majority of their fights. Because the goal of like sexual displays, or like mating displays to other males, is to not get into a fight. You don't want to be in fights. Fights are dangerous, and they cost a lot of energy. So you do everything you can to not get in one. And like, this is a way that male competition, that males keep themselves safe, is by this. So hippos have a very deep rumble that they call out through other that they call to each other. It goes like, mm, 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 mm. It basically is that call. And so what I wanted to see was that if you did deeper calls, would the males of the area get, like, would they feel more threatened than if it was a high pitched one? So we changed the pitch of the call that we found on the internet to make it deeper and higher. And then basically, like, like in the 1990 teenage movies when they hold the boombox over their heads, we would get into a vehicle, find some hippos, and I would hold it over my head and play back.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, it was cool. I don't think anything really happened with that, but because they're just tiny little projects. But I have to say, way more interesting than everyone else was doing with like the antelopes and stuff. Like power to the antelope researchers, because antelope behavior is super boring. All they do is they eat and look around, and that is it.
All those godly antelope researchers. Just-
Oh,
Well,
I've met a couple. It is hard. It is not easy, and it gets very boring.
yeah.
And so that was really a huge step in my development as a researcher, because I was like, you can actually do, and like, animal behavior research in the field is actually fun, because like, and I skipped over um a really big like thing that influenced my decisions into where I was going to go into science. Because so I was already super into science. I crushed biology, I crushed physics, like I was anything science related, like I made it mine. Um, but when I was in 11th grade, one of my teachers who had a doctorate in neurobiology, he had convinced the school to let him teach a like kind of a course that he just loves, which was it was just animal. It was an animal behavior and neuroscience course. And so we just learned. It was my first real introduction into like animal behavior. And we even got to train rats in a Skinner box. And for those who don't know what a Skinner box is, you don't skin the rat. It's nothing
Oh
bad for
gosh.
that. It's named after the guy.
It's
And
conditioning,
It's an
right?
so
unfortunate name.
Is it operant conditioning?
yeah, so it's all about it's how you learn about like conditioning animals and stuff. And so what the box had was that there was a light bulb and a little chain pulley, and then there was a little bar for it to press and it would get food. So what we had to trade uh what we had to train the rat to do was the light would turn on, it would pull the chain, and then it would go over and press the bar and get a little bit of food. And when it pressed the bar, the light would come back on. So we taught it to repeat this, and it had to do it 4 times in a minute. And like our rat was like, and me and my partners, it wasn't just me. I had two amazing. It was a set of twins, Libby and Testios. Shout out to them, even though they're not on Twitch, but they're really cool people. And like we all went hardcore, like trained our rat like it was like the Olympics, like rocking music going, because we would go in like during our lunch periods and like train it and everything. And so our rat could do it like 8 times in a minute or something. It was like the best train. He's our the professor like filmed our rat doing it, and he still has that video clip as like the example like years later. But that really was the first major step into animal behavior. And then the being study was really my second major step forward, because I was like, this is amazing. I really want to do like this. Animal behavior is the bomb. And then and the great thing about Beam is that it's through the Michigan State Hyena Project. So they study hyena. So all it was the people who were teaching it were grad students of the hyena lab, and we actually got to visit where their field site was in the Masai Mara in Kenya. And the Masai Mara, for those who don't know, is like you hear about the Serengeti, but the Serengeti is in Tanzania, and Kenya's on top of it. And so the Masai Mara is basically the ice cream to the cone of the Serengeti. It's all part of the same ecosystem. It's just given a different name in Kenya. So like you could study. So like she brings like newly graduated students and has them stay in the field for a year, helping her grad students collect data. And I was like, I am doing this. Nothing is stopping me. And I did. I applied, I interviewed, and I got in. And so as soon as I graduated from Duke, I then like within 4 months or something, I was in, or probably two, I think, I was in Kenya for a year in the bush,
Oh.
like researching hyenas. And
That's
that's
dope.
that's the next step.
That's really cool. That's like an experience I don't think
Oh yeah.
most people period would ever, get to do even anything like that. But even as a, from a science perspective, that's not even something a lot of researchers might even get to do. So really cool.
Yeah.
So
Incredible.
like, since we're on the like topic of, like wildlife, you mentioned like in your in the CV, all the information that you sent me was that some of your interests were in wildlife photography, as well as
Yeah.
being a wilderness first responder. Do you care to elaborate on those?
Right. So wildlife photography was not something that I thought about that I would. It was not something I would like actively was trying to get into. It was just that I would go on these. on all these things, and like in the beginning, like everyone wants to take pictures of what they see. So I just had like a little like square like little one of the little point and clicks when I first went to Africa, and then every single time I'd like get these photos and I'd edit them a little bit, and I'm like, oh, I really want, like, oh man, these photos could be so much better. Like I really want. So I would like just start slowly. I was just developing, like I was getting better and better cameras until I have my current setup, which is like a legit photography setup now. And like I know how, and like I've learned so much about photography, and it's the backbone of my Twitch channel, because I've taken so many, I have like 20, 30,000 photographs of animals and stuff. So so as I edit these photos on Twitch, I then talk about them, and it's always a good jumping off site to whatever area of interest we want to talk about that day. So I didn't ever think that that would be like a thing for me, but it's something I it's a hobby I deeply, deeply love now. I love going out and trying to like take pictures of wildlife now. The wilderness first responder thing, that was that before? No, that wasn't before I went to Kenya. Well, that was before I went to uh, my first time in Kenya for the behavioral ecology class, and because my mom wanted me to have like some kind of first responder skill. So they have them everywhere, and so it's just like you learning about like what's it like how to take care of fractures and concussions, and like what happens in like survival situations, and what should you do in these situations, and if someone has a bad fall, what do you check, like the ABCs. And it was taught by a great guy, who really was like very passionate about it, and really he was like a first responder and everything. He's been one for years, and like really knew his stuff. And so like we would have like kind of live trainings where he would use makeup to give people bruises and tell them like what they like, you're going to act like this is like you have this injury, you're going to act like this, and then we'd go out and have to diagnose it and and treat it. And I have to say, like, even when it's fake, it's really intense. Like
Yeah.
the first couple times, all your training just goes out the window, because you're just like, they're like, look, my arm is weird, and they have this giant bruise, or they have some like fake blood on their head, and you're just like, what do I do? And then
So
you're like, ABCs, airway, breathing, circulation.
I can speak to
Um,
this like experience. So like I'm a combat veteran. So one of
oh,
my one of my it's both part of my training and both part of when I help train other soldiers when you do CLS, so the combat lifesaver course, which is
mhm.
something that all soldiers will have to do usually at some point, at least if they're in any kind of combat role. And you know, you can learn about stuff in a classroom all day. You can sit there and have practical exercises all day. But I promise you, that first time you have a practical exercise, and what we would do is we would usually have a like a room. Like in this case, it was like a garage bay, and we
Mhm.
would turn out the lights and have a fog machine going, and we would have these casualties, which were
That's
um actors, other soldiers who would lay on the ground, and we'd throw, you know, we'd have them wear their, you know, crappy BDUs, or we'd have other ones, and we'd throw fake blood all over the place. And I had one of my favorite ones to train on. I literally just laid on the ground and I just screamed. I didn't do anything else. Like they'd come up and try to render aid, and I would grab them and just start screaming in their face. And you have these privates, you know, who've never been in a, and now they've got some sergeant who's got fake, you know, legs
right.
missing, grabbing them and screaming in their face, and they forget everything
Oh
immediately.
yeah, I would absolutely forget everything. That's so intense.
And I think it's so low tech. That was the best part. We would just have like a crappy strobe light and a fog machine and turn the lights out, and that was enough to, and some screaming, and that was enough um
Freak people out.
to ruin them. So,
Oh,
and having been in that scenario, like the last one I remember doing was like a little more of an elaborate setup, and there's like a fake overturned Humvee, and there's just
Wow.
like it's intense, but it's a very good But here's like that exposure though, like what you're pointing out is really good training. It's really good learning because you can, like I said, you can sit there and read from a book. You can do the practical. You can know how to do everything perfectly, but until you're in like a situation that's
Right.
analogous to what it might actually be, and it prepares you in a way, because if you know you're walking into your first scenario and it's crazy and chaos and panic, that it's a bad time, man. But
Yeah.
it's yeah, no, I can attest to the first responder. Well, it's different, but I can attest to that kind of training.
Right. Oh yeah, like yours is what I experience on steroids.
It's
Uh,
like I said, it's low tech. It's just it's literally just a dark room with a strobe light and a fog machine and
yeah.
screaming.
Right. No, that's crazy. And like we actually at the end we had a test where he actually found like local actors and stuff, and we went to a cave that they had gone like caving or something, and they had fallen, and like we had to put them on like makeshift stretchers and like get them out of the cave and such. Um so it was so yeah, I mean it definitely like helped a it definitely helped. And we and actually later, so not only did I do Beam that trip, I also had gone to Zambia for just as a job, just to be to work at a lodge. I sucked at it. I definitely got fired from it. They didn't tell me I got fired, but I looking back, I'm like, I totally got fired. But I also get why I did because I sucked. I was such a like I was such I treated it as a vacation, not a job, which is like if anyone, I don't know if anyone's like really for any age, but for anyone young, if anyone's young on here, like do not if you go anywhere that's cool, you have to keep this in mind. Do not treat it like a vacation. Treat it like a job. Like you have to have that mantra in your head, otherwise you will get fired, like me. Um and so yeah, it just but during that there was the trucks that we were there, the trucks were basically just pickup trucks that then had installed seating on the back. That's kind of how they were. And so they're pretty high off the ground, and for whatever reason this lodge company just didn't have like stepping stools, and this old lady was trying to clamber out, and she fell out of it and landed flat on her back,
Oh,
and she was like, "Ah, my back, my back," and me and the everyone else was like, "Oh, what do we do?"
Oh gosh.
We just were looking at each other like, "Holy shit, dude! Like that just happened." And I'm like trying to remember my training and everything. I mean, I didn't do much. Luckily, randomly, another couple that was there, one of them was a cardiologist. And
Oh,
so he
wow.
remembered, I mean, he remembered enough of his like old training to like check her spine and everything. I'm like, oh shit, I should have remembered that. Like
Fine,
that's
yeah.
what you do with a full victim. You like make sure that they're not. And she was fine, but for that like for 3 minutes we were just looking at each other like oh my god, this is like because we were in the middle. It wasn't like at the lodge. We had taken the guests to a breakfast in the middle of the bush, and so we were like 30 minutes away from the lodge, and we are just like, "Oh my god, like what the heck?" Um yeah, I remember that. That does totally random, but that reminds me of a story when I went rafting with my family on a Grand Canyon trip with some of my mom's friends. And my mom, it was my mom, it was her friend who both are dermatologists, and then my mom's friend's husband, who's an allergist. And so one of the guides, we were going through the slot canyon. One of the guides like pressed up to get through the slot canyons and just like popped his shoulder out. And
Ooh,
so my mom and they were the
so
only
painful.
doctors. So my mom and her friend and her husband were just looking at each other like, we haven't done anything like this for 30 years. So it was like some weird joke, like two dermatologists and an allergist get stuck in the woods with a guy who popped his shoulder out. Like
yep.
it was just a bad joke all around.
It's it is very much like a joke. Like they, two dermatologists walk into a bar, and
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that was yeah, but that's the wilderness survival thing. I really haven't ever needed to use it. And honestly, if I ever go back into the field, I really should take a course again. I mean, my certification already expired like 5 years ago, so like it would be a good refresher, just so like if anything does happen, I'm not completely useless.
Awesome. Well, so just to keep moving it along, so like,
Right.
Yeah, I
you know,
gotta get going here real soon, but I have a question before I go.
Yeah.
Have you ever worked with pine martens?
No, I had a friend who did. Um,
So I'm over here in Colorado, and I've heard that there's supposedly pine martens here. I guess they're really hard to see. I would really
Probably.
love to see a pine marten.
Yeah, I mean, you would definitely you would need to go into the forest. The place to look would be where the squirrels are. The pine martens
Oh, because they're
specialize
hunting the
a lot.
squirrels.
They specialize in squirrels, and they specialize in birds and like nesting birds because they're small and they climb. And they're great climbers, and they're almost like little weasel squirrels in themselves, but they
Yeah,
go and they hunt in the trees and go down holes and stuff. So you
I've heard
definitely
they're one
would
of the
have to
few
go.
animals with retractable claws, and they're not cats.
Yes, I can't. I couldn't remember if they had retractable claws or not. So the pine
I'm
martens are
I'm
part of
fairly
the.
certain they do, unless somebody's been lying to me.
I think then that's probably right. They're part of the mustelids family, which is like
Yeah,
weasels. Like the wolverine is part of it. You got your skunks and those and that
ferrets.
branch. Yeah, and like ferrets too. So they are in the same, I think, order of with felids. They're in the feliform family,
Got it.
but
Yeah.
they split off uh, a while ago.
So, do you have a favorite animal? This is going to be a tough
Jaguar.
question.
I
Jaguar.
I the jaguar. I remember I fell in love with it in second grade. And I haven't seen one in the wild. I've spent a little time in South America, but I haven't really I haven't done any research in South America, mostly because like all the monkeys are all high up in the trees. There's nothing that lives on the ground, and I don't want to be doing this looking at a like I did that a bit when I was in Uganda studying chimps because the chimps would climb trees and all the fruit trees and stuff, and the fruit trees are like 100 feet in the air. So you're just like this, trying to like look through your binoculars, trying to look through the foliage, trying to look at them, and it just wasn't my thing. But I would love to see to go. I really want to go to the Pantanal, which is in southern Brazil slash Bolivia, I think. And it's a big wetland area, and I would love to do one of the river trips, the river like safaris there, to like see a jaguar on the edge. Like that would
It'd be
just be
awesome.
that would be amazing.
that'd be really cool. I would love to see that. It's so Zokya has a little bit of a heart out today because he's gonna get started, but we do have one more like real big question for you, and it's important. Now, folks, make sure that you're going and following JacksFacts on Twitch. Because like a really important thing since we started this channel was really all about connecting like science communicators as well as experts and that sort of thing. So that kind of leads into the question, like, what caused you to start streaming the content that you are on Twitch, and how would you describe your experience so far with content creation?
So, the reason why I got into Twitch was in the beginning I was following this big streamer that I always really enjoyed in the community, and so I would just like for a buck donate like an animal fact, and I would do it pretty frequently to the point that like everyone knew who I was. And people were like, "Oh, this is so cool!" Like, not like I love like this is one of my favorite parts about the stream. Like the fact that like we're watching this really funny streamer, but also like learning about animals. Like that's so awesome. And so my and so after a while, people were like, "Oh, like, do you have a Twitch channel? I would love like, do you have a Twitch channel?" And part of me is just like, I would love to have a Twitch channel. Like, I have a little bit of a YouTube channel, but like it's not anything that big. I just haven't been able to really do anything with it because I just never have the time. Like to edit, like editing videos is just something that
It's time up.
I'm not great at, and it takes a ton of time. If you want to do it right, it takes a ton of time.
Yep, absolutely.
And so for me, I was like, Twitch is a great compromise in that I'm kind of doing an educational outreach because I want people to learn and care about more about animals, all at the same, the while just like having fun myself. And so for me, Twitch was just like this perfect combination of the two. And so, I mean, it's been a slow, because I haven't been posting on YouTube much, it's been a slow growing channel, that's for sure. But I've been working with an editor to try and like makes my videos like viable for YouTube. But it's one of those things that I've really enjoyed, that I really enjoy putting my time in and interacting with people, and people really respond to it so well, that because people go on, it's like, oh, I was looking for this original thing, but you were like doing this, and like I had to see what was going on. And it's been really amazing, like developing a community about it. And I think one of my favorite things myself is interviewing people, because because like it's then expanding my own knowledge and of before it. And that's some of the coolest things. I've learned just some of the most amazing things by interviewing others. Um, and so that's really what I've wanted, because I knew for Twitch, the way that you can be any kind of mild success on Twitch is that you either have to be the best at something or you have to do something different.
Yep.
And for me, doing like no one else is really doing this. The only other guy that really does this is paleontologizing, um, and like but he just does it better than me. uh,
He's been like if you folks out there, if you don't know who paleontologizing is, like it's probably the biggest science streamer. He's definitely not the only one, but definitely one that actually has like a regular, and like
yeah,
I would agree. No, I agree with your point entirely. When it comes to Twitch, I'm going to say that there's a third formula to success on Twitch, but it's not a great one. There's people who are really good at things. There's people who are like what you said, who are just doing something different. But then there's also people who like I'm going to say it's the MLM like side, like the support for support type
oh
garbage.
right,
But no, it's I agree, and I'm a huge fan. Reason why I started doing the stuff that I wanted to do is because with the makerspace streams is because it was something like what you said, something that no one else is doing, and clearly there's people who have this interest. They just need to come find you. So once again, another reason why we have the podcast is so people can go find those things. And
yeah,
we've, I really have found myself incredibly impressed with the SciComm, the science technology, uh, like subcategory on Twitch, and the amount
yeah,
of sharing between, because it's also just important from a science communication perspective. Informing people, not just those who are interested in going and finding on their own, but then they can come and just hang out and learn something. And I think there's a value in Twitch and YouTube and other platforms that just really hasn't had its full potential unlocked yet, but that's changing.
right,
So
right.
so then if we already mentioned one streamer, but like do you have any other streamers that are like favorite ones other than yourself?
Well, educational wise, I mean, who just rate like Ozzy is a great like educational streamer.
I was in there earlier.
Um, yeah, like I saw the rate, I'm like, oh yeah, he's great. Um, gosh, I so I I rarely. So outside of that, I mean, they're just not. I mean, I follow mostly like non-educational streamers because
Mhm.
like that's just where I get my entertainment from. Um, and there are some really funny guys. Like Mr. Sark is very funny. And then Doug is another one of my favorites. Those are probably my top two favorite streamers. Um, but educational wise, I haven't. part of the problem for me is I haven't taken the time to explore the science educational sphere of Twitch much uh because like every time I end the stream, I have to immediately get off to make food because like
What
my
you're saying
girlfriend
is
is
you have a
just like,
life, and being a grad student isn't just like you know, like
right,
there's things you have to do. Like,
right, yeah. So often when I finish streaming, I'm like, all right, guys, here's a raid bot.
yep.
But Dr. WD40, he does a lot of really good. He does outdoor like wilderness education. So he streams on like hikes and stuff. I think he lives in Florida. So he'll hike the Everglades, and a lot of it's like bird watching, I think. But I think it's a lot of I haven't been on many of his, but a lot of people really like his stuff. If you ever want to like, I think it's a very chill kind of very peaceful time, and like you get to look at critters and stuff and out there. It's very different, and I highly recommend it if none of you guys have seen it. But yeah, Dr. WD40 is a good guy. He's good.
Awesome. Well, Jack, gotta say, like, appreciate having you on. Been the first time we've had a guest in a
Yeah,
while, and you've been excellent.
thank you.
And it's just I don't know, guys. That's a lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool creators out there, in not just in the Twitch
Yeah.
land, the Twitch like ecosphere. There's other different places, and we definitely plan to get a lot more of those involved in here going soon. Folks, this has been the Armchair Science Podcast. Thank you for listening to the Armchair Science Podcast with El Taco Meat and Zokya Media. Theme music is Whispers by CRM Losi.